Hello and welcome. My guest today believes the world has a big problem, but America can be a leader in solving it. I'm joined today by Thomas Friedman, the renowned New York Times columnist. His career includes 3 Pulitzer Prizes and 5 best-selling books, including his latest, Hot, Flat and Crowded: Why We Need a Green Revolution and How It Can Renew America. In it, Friedman calls on the United States to change its sense of purpose by taking the lead in solving the global environmental problem. The book discusses the convergence of 3 forces: global warming, the rise of the middle classes in countries like India and China, and an overall global population growth. In his Code Green call to action, Tom Friedman pushes the United States to re-evaluate its place in the world and take on initiatives and technology as a way to win wars, re-establish its place as a global leader, as well as repair its severely damaged image. But in these times of economic crisis and upheaval, how realistic is this call to action? On today's show, we look at Hot, Flat and Crowded and ask, can America lead a global green revolution? Don't forget the lines are open for your participation. Tom, good to have you on the show.
Great to be with you, Riz, and a global audience.
And a global audience, yes. No, it's good you could join us. Now, it's interesting, just before we went live, you said what's going on in America right now is the greatest show on earth. Yeah, and I have to ask you about this because considering the financial state of the way the world is at the moment, a better title for the book might be Hot, Flat, Crowded and in Debt, I guess. But
I hope it's not Hot, Flat, Crowded and Busted.
Busted, okay. Exactly, big time.
That's what I fear, but I hope it doesn't come to that.
Now, what sort of impact do you think that the sort of financial wheezings of so many countries, and especially America now, might have an impact on your hope of America rejuvenating itself?
Well, you know, obviously a lot of what I talk about in the book, launching a green revolution in America, dominating the energy technology, new technologies, inventing them, they require a certain price signal. I'm a big fan of high oil prices. Ultimately, I want them to come down, but for them to come down, first they have to go up. And if we see now global oil prices retreating, gasoline prices retreating, people will say, well, maybe I don't need that smaller car. Maybe I don't need that new, more energy efficient system in my house. Energy prices are rolling back. So that is not good for innovation.
Now, looking at the way America is seen around the world, and you know very well with the amount you travel, I'm going to quote you from your book, Hot, Flat and Crowded, and this quote is on America's future.
Right.
And you say, I will never get used to watching grandmothers in wheelchairs being examined with metal detectors, but it's not the level of security that's the core issue for me. My problem is not what with the metal detectors and screenings. My problem is that there's nothing waiting on the other side. What do you mean by that?
You picked out one of my favorite quotes,
Okay,
and we never talked. And the point I was making was, I understand we have real enemies in the world. The broader point I'm making is we've lost our groove since 9/11 as a country. We kind of lost our way. We got into the business of exporting a lot more fear than hope. That's really not us. We're off our game. And what I was trying to say in that quote is, I understand we have real enemies in the world. You've got to go through metal detectors. You know what, Riz? I'll go through 16 metal detectors out here at Dulles Airport on one condition, that on the other side of the metal detector is a great project worthy of America's inspirational and innovative capacity, not just another metal detector. We are not the United States of fighting terrorism. We are not the United States of fighting terrorism.
What's driven that? Because of course it's terrible. It does give a very negative, and you mentioned this in your book, how people are reluctant to come to the US now. They don't want to be treated like criminals from the outset, you know.
Well, obviously this is post 9/11, and you know, 9/11 happened. There are real and legitimate fears. There's been improved, security, no doubt. But I always tell people, for me, I weep for everyone killed on 9/11. It was a terrible day. But for me, 9/11 is still just the day between 9/10 and 9/12. My day is the 4th of July. Okay, my day is the 4th of July. 9/11 was about those hijackers. 4th of July is about us.
Right.
And we need to get back to that country that always, insists that the future will bury the past, not that the past will bury the future.
Well, you point out that now it's a case of, China supplying our money, Saudi Arabia supplying our oil, and you say in your latest op-ed column, you point out that old saying, he who has the gold makes the rules, and that the US no longer has the gold, and so it'll have to start listening to the rules of those who lend theirs to
There's
America.
no question when you don't save enough and you're not ready to raise taxes on your people. But we had a remarkable debate the other night between Governor Sarah Palin of Alaska and Senator Joe Biden. And at one point, my favorite point of the debate is where Sarah Palin says, my least favorite point of the debate, where she says, Senator Biden says paying taxes is patriotic. We in the middle class, we don't think it's patriotic. What are you talking about, lady? You've got a son serving in Iraq. Where do you think the body armor comes for those troops? You just said you're for the $700 billion bailout. Where does that money come from? Does it come from Mars? Do Martians give us that money? Does it grow on fruit trees here? It either comes from printing money or from China. So what do you want to do, sweetheart? You want to print it or do you want to borrow it? But if we don't tax our own people, okay, and I happen to believe that I grew up in a middle-class town, in a middle-class suburb, in a middle-class family too. And my family, my parents taught me that paying taxes was a patriotic duty. It's what you do to support the government you have, the greatest government on earth. It doesn't grow on trees.
You talk about America losing its groove and, you know, suggesting how it might take the leadership position in the world as well by leading the world with a green revolution. And we had an email from a skeptical viewer in New Zealand. Zelina in Hamilton wrote in saying, speaking from a country who is leading the way with trying to go green, Americans seem to think the world begins and ends with them. So how about they stop leading us all into a more polluted world? Now, I guess I wonder how easy it is going to be to sell the idea of America leading a green revolution when it's generally been seen as this sort of selfish consuming monster and hasn't signed on to Kyoto.
It's a perfectly legitimate point. We are not the world's leader. The theme of this book is very simply is that in a world that's getting hot, global warming, flat, the rise of all these middle classes consuming and living like Americans, and crowded, sheer population growth, energy technology, what I call ET, you know, we had IT was information technology, I call ET energy technology. That's going to be the next great global industry. Riz, it has to be if we're going to have a sustainable planet once things get hot, flat, and crowded. Now, I know that as sure as I know I'm talking to my friend Riz Khan here. Here's what I don't know. Are we going to lead that revolution? Is New Zealand going to lead it? Is India, China, Russia, Abu Dhabi? I don't know who's going to lead this revolution. It's still up for grabs. But what I'm saying in this book and to my own countrymen is that the country that leads ET is going to have the most national security, energy security, economic security, healthy environment, and global respect. I want that country to be my country.
Let's follow up with an email that came in from France then, and Bruno Druski, who's a regular viewer, who wrote in saying, is America capable of carrying out such a radical revolution against its basic value of consumerism? If so, which social group in the US do you see as being able to do it?
It's a good question. You know, I see this revolution, though, differently. I see this as an innovation challenge. Implicit in that very good question is, though, that we have to regulate. You know, Riz, you're going to have to eat less, I'm going to have to drive less. We may have to come to that in a world that's hot, flat, and crowded. But I'm not sure yet. I still want to see what we can invent, to the degree we can invent our way out of this problem. I know for sure we cannot regulate our way out of it. This is an innovation challenge. It's the greatest innovation challenge today.
I was fascinated to read how your approach to the rapidly growing Indian and Chinese economies, for example, the developing countries that have a huge consumer potential, and most people worry about them and say, you know, how do we hold them in check? You take a different approach and say, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Explain that.
Well, you know, there's a portion of the green movement historically, and I know where these people are coming from, I have great respect for them, but they kind of look at countries like India and China, the developing world, and their basic argument is, there's too many of you. There's just too many. Could a few of you go away? There's too many of you, okay? My attitude is, first of all, they're not going to go away. And I have great respect for these people. And guess what? They want to live just like me. They want to have a house and a car, raise their family, send them to college, go on vacation. So they're not going to go away. So if you don't have growth built into your model, you have nothing. So the challenge is, how do we allow all of these people to grow to our level, okay, and beyond maybe, and at the same time, don't burn up the whole planet and devour up the whole planet. There's only one way to do that, Riz. That's innovation. Who can invent a source of abundant, cheap, clean, reliable electrons? Only a source of abundant, cheap, clean, reliable electrons will allow India to grow, China to grow, and America to grow, the Arab world to grow. And it's consuming a lot more of its energy now as it's building new cities and new towns and new highways and new infrastructure. That's the only way out.
So your argument is, if they're busy consuming in traditional ways, that perhaps this gives America the window to say, we'll go out and get the new technology then.
Oh yeah, what I say, whenever I go to China, young Chinese say to me, Mr. Friedman, you guys got to grow dirty for 150 years. Now it's our turn. And what I say to them is, you are absolutely right. It's your turn. Take your time. Grow as dirty as you want, because I think my country needs just maybe 5 years to invent all the clean power technologies you're going to need as you choke to death, and then we're going to come over and we're going to sell them all to you, and we're going to clean your clock. I don't know how you say clean your clock in Chinese. We're going to clean your clock in the next great global industry. Now, when you frame the problem like that, that's when I see the headsets adjusting and them saying, it takes them about 30 seconds to get it. This is going to be the next great global industry. You got two choices. You can complain about it, say it's unfair, or you can leapfrog us and own it.
Now, interestingly, we had an email that came in from Kansas.
Kansas?
From Kansas, USA. Deborah Plummer, who writes in Regulec, she said, how can we be leaders of a green economy when so many of our governments don't even believe in global climate change? Now, to what extent is that true, that you feel there are still governments in denial about what's happening?
You know, there are governments in denial, there's no question about it, but I think they're fewer and fewer. The biggest government in denial was right here in this city, led by George Bush and Dick Cheney. So, you know, we are in no position to be pointing fingers anywhere else. We're the real laggards in this. I have a friend, Joe Rahm, he writes a great climate blog, and you know, Joe likes to say this, Riz, he likes to say that there's many good things about improved health care, but the best part of improved health care is all the climate deniers are going to live long enough to see how wrong they were. Unfortunately, if they slow us down, it's not going to be a very pretty picture. Now, a lot of people say, wait a minute, global average temperatures have only gone up a little less than 2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1750. I mean, that's what all this Al Gore thing is about. 2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1750. I always say to them, that is what it's about. Because you know what the global climate system is? It's a lot like your body. When your temperature goes from 98.6 to 100.6, you don't feel too good. And if you just go from 100.6 to 102.6, you go to the hospital. So does Mother Nature. She doesn't like it when it gets that hot. And Mother Nature, she's just chemistry, biology, and physics. You can't spin her, you can't buy her, you can't bribe her, you can't talk her down from the tree. She, as Rob Watson says, she's just chemistry, biology, and physics, and she's going to do what she's going to do. And as we say in American lingo, she always bats last, and she always bats 1,000.
Right. We've got a call from Kenya on the line. Mirav, good to have you with us. What would you like to ask?
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
Hi.
I wanted to ask if UN or any other major bodies can play a big role in helping countries like USA, China, and India shift to mainly depending on oil to other alternatives such as solar power and help enforce such laws.
Well, you know, it's a very good question, and as I argue in my book, I think what our role is in America is obviously to make the big front-end investments in research, try to make the innovation breakthroughs, and then use the great manufacturing platforms of India and China to get these new technologies down to the China price, down to what they call the Chindia price, the price at which they will scale in China and India or Kenya. That's where we want to go. And there's an ecosystem there. Our job, make the big front-end investments. We have the capital, we have the research labs, and then get them working on that platform.
You must be very frustrated with the way immigration's going, because I know you say let's pin a green card on the you know, every PhD candidate in this country comes from overseas because the talent in his brain.
I'm an immigration radical, Riz. My great-grandparents came here, settled in Minnesota, came from Russia and Eastern Europe. And you know, I always say, any Haitian who can build a raft out of milk cartons and sail from Haiti to Florida, give them a green card, baby. Okay, that is, you know, basically immigrants, both at the skilled end, at the high end, and the low end. They're like the fire that keeps our country boiling. They keep us fresh. That's what's unique about America. And you know what I would say to people is, our Chinese will beat your Chinese. Our Indians will beat your Indians. Okay, our Pakistanis will beat your Pakistanis. Our French will beat your French. Because you come here, you mix them all up in this system. I mean, I'm being facetious. Right, but it's a wonderful place, and it's that exchange of ideas that keeps this country alive. So yes, we have to protect our borders, and that's why I always tell people, I'm for a really high wall. Oh, I'm for a really high wall and a really big gate. Okay. Give people a high wall to give them a sense that we do control our borders, but make sure the gate is really big. And any person who comes over here and gets a PhD in this country, I say, staple a green card, staple a passport right to their diploma. I want that person, I don't care if it's in Greek philosophy, astrophysics, or bioengineering.
How do you get around what's happened now then? I mean, people are so scared to come. People from the Middle East are scared to come. They're big investors here, for example. And as you point out, the capital is needed here now as well. How do you convince people to get around this fear that's been generated about what America means to immigrants?
Well, I think this crisis is going to do a lot. I mean, I did my column on Sunday. The headline, we write our own headlines, was called Swedish spoken here. You know, you see that in the shops in New York. Maybe Arabic spoken here or Chinese spoken here. We're going to need a lot of those signs in our stores because we need people to come over here and spend and to help our economy. By the way, they need us to be responsible savers and investors so our dollar remains strong because they're holding those dollars. They don't want them, you know, to turn to worthless paper. And so we all have a role. I think, Riz, you know, a lot of people have been saying, you know, to me, the world isn't flat. It's spiky, it's lumpy, it's curvy, it's kaleidoscopic. I tell them all, look, you're all, you know, are you all paying attention? Okay, people said the world was going to get decoupled. Oh, really? Decoupled? Did you see that happen in the markets today? Did you see any decoupling today? Okay, first it was Japan, then it was China, then it was Kuala Lumpur, and then it came right across the ocean to Europe, and then America. It's a flat world, baby. Ain't going to be no decoupling, no islands out there. The world is flat. Don't believe any of that BS.
Now, before we take a break, I'm going to get a quick question in from Israel because Abraham's on the line. Thanks for waiting. What's your question quickly?
Mr. Friedman, it's Abraham Bull calling from Israel. You describe a flat world as if it's clean and dirty, period. But there are other hills, like religious one, national one, etc. What do you do with the rest of the world which does not answer this dimension of yours of a flat world, but looks for a curvy, hilly, mountainy
Abraham,
one?
before we get to the answer, we have to take a very short break. We'll get straight to that when we return in just a few moments.